So hi everybody, it's T. Valken Napier. Welcome to Building a Career That Matters. Today we're going to continue our debrief of the group profile we did on the 2020 strategic plan for human development professionals, so success strategy. And last time around, we went through the rankings and reviewed the activity list, and we started to touch upon one of the activities. Today, what I'd like to do is start right with activity number one and walk our way through what these grids are telling us. Now, again, for each of the individuals who have filled this out, we're more than happy to read your change grid for you privately, complimentary, of course. You just need to send me an email to schedule that. So tnapier@changeworkssystem.com. That's two S's in a row, changeworkssystem.com. I also put the video up of our first session on YouTube. And because I figured, then you look at all, people moving forward are going to be listening to that recording, I also gave them the link to be able to fill out the Changeworks profile for themselves. And so same offer extends to all of you. If you are listening to this down the road, feel free to fill out the Changeworks profile. I'll leave it active indefinitely so you can fill it out. And then as you're listening to these recordings, you can look at your own results and see how you fare. And again, I'm more than happy to read your change grid for you privately. So with that, let's kind of jump right into activity number one, which was meeting my financial goals for 2022. Now, as you look at this Changeworks profile, just again as a way of reminder, particularly for those of you who are not fluent in all things tension management, the diamond shape that you see is the ideal location on the change grid for this specific activity. Now, the ideal location we've chosen is to be an amiable, driven driver. So we want you to keep a smile on your face, but we want you to go out there and make this one happen. So that's what that driven driver energy is all about, getting to a destination, and you do it by just doing it. And we'd like you to have that as your energy, but that amiable tertiary energy makes sure you're going to be pleasant and all those good sorts of things that one needs to be if you want to protect your existing client relationships and add even more to your pool. So that's the ideal location for this specific activity. Right now, if you look at the triangle, this is where all of you are plotting on average. In this particular case, the average does represent one of you. Again, you need to be looking at your own results to figure out which of these alpha characters might represent you. And for those of you who filled this out after the fact, you don't have none of these numbers or none of these alpha characters represents you. So you just have to look at your own change grid and figure out how close are you to that average, how close are you to the desired location. Now, from a developmental perspective, the Changeworks group profile gives those of us that are in the world of either group coaching, some sort of large team kind of consulting sort of a project, or we're functioning as a bit of a trainer. This tells us where we need to put our energy if we want to be of greatest help to this population. And the thing that grabs my eye right away, or you guys, if you want, you can just, I'll turn this into a quiz if you want and say, unmute yourself and tell me what you think the grid is actually saying. But I'll at least give you this first one as a model. Ideally, I'd like people to view their level of ability to meet their financial goals for 2022 as a solid 10. It's great that many of you consider yourselves to be 11. I'm glad none of you are arrogant enough to think that you are 12 when it comes to that, or pretty much anything for that matter. But a nice solid 10. I also don't want you to underestimate the challenge of meeting your financial goals for 2022. So that's why I said it'd be great for your challenge to also be a 10. Now, if you happen to be this individual down here, a D or A and C, you've got plenty of ability, but the level of challenge is not particularly high enough to pull you into full engagement. So we could change the background image, and I could show you that right now you guys are in downgrid intention, but we'd like you to be fully engaged in that particular activity. So what does that translate into? It translates into that you may be settling for the kind of clients that are finding you, or settling for the price point that you have these clients at. And if you're happy there, well, then fine, do a happy dance and move on. But the change grid would indicate that at least for this cluster of people that's plotting a bit further down grid, you do have the opportunity to raise the bar. You do have the opportunity to change the task, to raise the standards, to move yourself to a new level of your organization when it comes to meeting those financial goals. So that's you guys. You don't have an ability problem, but you are starting to droop down grid, and that means you're starting to rest on your laurels, harvest what's already been sown, whatever metaphor you want to use. But the point is that you're not as actively engaged in building that business as the grid would indicate you could be doing. Just because you could be doing it does not mean you are obligated to do it, but just know that's what we're looking at there. Any comments, questions about these downgrade plottings from anyone? Thoughts?
So if it were you, T, you would be using some upgrade change maneuvers to modify
Yeah,
things.
certainly if I was working with this group, and I do work with most of you, so but I tend to work with you guys individually, so I'd like to see your individual results. But if I was working with you as a group, I think having kind of like a discussion around raising the bar, what does that look like? Why would you want to do that? What would the motivators be for you? But bottom line, as David has already alluded to, this is about upgrade maneuvers. So again, the upgrade maneuvers, we need to increase the standards against which you are measuring your definition of success. Number two, you could change the task in some subtle or profound kind of way to just make it a little bit more interesting, a little more engaging. You could awaken the emotions that are associated with the ideal location. In this particular case, where the ideal location is, would be very strong confidence, very brave, out there wanting to be a leader, serve as a leader, change the world, make a difference. All those kinds of mission, vision kinds of statements would apply to this energy. Maybe if you were just to revisit and rekindle that emotional state, that would be all it takes to get you back up here into being perhaps more selective about how you're meeting those financial goals. Maybe this is the time where you could shed some things that may be lucrative but aren't particularly as rewarding for you as other kinds of work might be. So maybe it's time to free up some space so that you could fill it with things that are more interesting, more lucrative, more whatever. And then the last upgrade maneuver is boost accountability. You may very well need to have someone help you stay focused on making those changes as you embark upon them, because otherwise you're just going to continue to slip down grid. Remember, natural movement on the change grid is down grid. Okay, other comments, thoughts about this particular situation of being further down grid than is desirable?
This is Peter. I think it's very insightful, T. It's really amazing, how that plays out in my life, what you're sharing.
Okay, I'm so glad. Yeah, because, again, each of you are also working with a group of clients. There's no reason why you, I mean, those of you who have access to the change grid, can't create your own activity list to do a beginning of the year or whatever increment you want to replicate it at. Survey that just kind of is touching point with everybody, just to see how are they doing right now about their mission critical activities overall that they kind of share as a group. And then that again helps you to better focus what your coaching services, consulting services, or training services might be delivering. Now, I am a bit more concerned, although I must say I'm a bit more concerned with those of you who are reporting an ability of less than 10. And that does represent more than half of the population who has completed the profile in preparation for this debrief. So there's some 9s and some 8s. So, these are nice solid scores. No one's got anything to be embarrassed about. But you guys are freely acknowledging that you don't know how to do this as well as you would like to do it. And so as a result, the challenge is definitely higher. And again, I don't mind the challenge being high. I want you to keep the challenge high, but I'd like you to have the ability to meet that challenge head on. And so for those of you that are reporting these lower levels of ability, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, this is where you might want to look a little bit more about expanding your skill set or becoming a little bit more calculated in how you go about doing your business. So this whole perceived ability is about knowledge, skill, and experience. So there's something you need to learn, something you need to practice, some resource you need to put in place. So when we do the individual debriefs, if you are in this situation, we'll talk specifically about what that knowledge, skill, experience, or core physical resource happens to be that needs to be looked at. So in summary, the grid would basically tell me that I have a population who needs to be guided in equal doses with ability boosting input, and also some input to keep that level of tension high or get them to grow that level of productive tension, increase that standard, etc. Okay, now I'm curious, for those of you who are Changeworks fluent, was that a good review? Does that open your eyes to anything about how you might be able to use the Change Grid with your own clients? Yep. Okay, Drew, you're the only one unmuted at the moment. So if any of you are saying anything, unmute thyselves.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, good. All right, now, while there are going to be some differences as we click our way through the remaining activities, I will say to you that it's not surprising to find this overall scatter pattern to be somewhat consistent across the activity set. Now that speaks more about you as a population than anything else, but nevertheless, don't be surprised to see a lot of this. What is great about that is that the whole group, pretty much, a few floaters, is saying we have a driver energy around this activity. We want to make this happen. So I'm seeing high levels of intention, high levels of engagement, even some people plotting out here in execution. So this bodes well. But remember, particularly for those of you who are functioning as coaches, coaching is really all about getting people the rest of the way to their destination. So I have no trouble at all saying to all of you, you are well on your way to that destination, but there is still work that needs to be done. Different work for different people, but nevertheless, there is work that needs to be done to get you the rest of the way to your desired outcome. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the second activity. And by the way, just again, feel free to unmute and ask whatever you want to ask or share whatever you want to share. And let's keep this as engaging as we can for everyone. Now, I found this interesting. Keeping my calendar filled with billable services. Keeping my calendar filled with billable services. As we talked about last time around, how you define a full calendar is unique to you. So whether that's 20 hours a week of billable services or 30 hours a week or whatever, I don't care. It's up to your goals, your business model, your lifestyle, your work style, etc. But however you define a filled calendar, well, this is all about, can you keep your calendar filled with those billable services? Now, we still have the same desired location for this one. This is definitely an amiable driven driver activity. This is an activity where we need to make it happen, and we're going to make it happen by making it happen, staying focused on this as being the goal. Keep that calendar filled with billable services. So desired location is the same as the activity before. A few of you are there, darn close to it. But we have a lot of people that are plotting in a nice little engagement band here, actively doing the kinds of things necessary to achieve this outcome. But look at the range of ability this time. I don't have as many people plotting at 10 and 11. I have most of the group plotting at 8 or below, as far down as 3. And this particular individual, whoever individual P is actually up in stress when it comes to doing this. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done as far as this activity is concerned about. How do you go about doing this? Again, this is about increasing perceived ability. So knowledge, skill, experience, and perhaps some resources, some core resources. Might might be what's missing. So this is something that I think we would definitely want to carve out a session on your ongoing professional development calls or on the Circle of Brilliance calls, where we could just say, how do you think our industry can most effectively go about doing this? Now, although several of you are reporting a lower level of challenge around doing it, again, I got to go back and wonder, is that because you already have some contracts in place that are readily filling your calendar? Are you working as more of a contract kind of a human development professional? So business development is really not on your shoulders, which on the one hand sounds good, but when the economy starts to struggle, that becomes a real problem because you're relying on these people to keep you busy, and they may be having their own struggles. So if they're not doing it and you're not doing it, well, then nobody's doing it. And so, we need to kind of look at this and go, is this still serving you well? I mean, I'm glad no one's down there with a 1, 2, 3 when it comes to challenge. You all see it as being moderately challenging up to a relatively high level of challenge. I'm also glad that no one considers it an 11 or a 12, an impossible task. So overall, this is more a screaming, we need training around this issue than anything else. But again, when it comes to doing the individual reads, we can get more fine-tuned. All right, so you guys go ahead, unmute it for a little bit, get a little bit of feedback here. Do you clearly see why I'm saying this is more of a training issue? And do you have any question about why we chose this as the perfect location? Anything at all? So David, Tim, questions, thoughts?
Yeah, hey T and everyone. I'm just curious, T, how would you factor in, external pressures, things that, as the market is responding to COVID and just how it's dragging down the market for some.
Well, it's interesting. You would think that if it's dragging down the market, we would see an increase in challenge because that's changing the whole dynamic. So, and I would think I'd be seeing people saying the challenge is a 10, certainly people saying it's an 11. And if their business has crumbled because of COVID and economic downturns and all that, I wouldn't be surprised to even see a few people give it a 12. So I don't really see a high enough level of challenge to be too concerned about that. However, the corollary of what you've just alluded to may very well be true. I wonder if some of this downgrade plotting energy is because a lot of human development professionals, now that the pandemic is at least getting a little bit more manageable and the economy is starting to recover a little bit, maybe they're still dealing with that, what we call before the Great Resignation. Maybe they themselves have decided to wonder, if not actually begin to wind things down, to be a little bit more content with what they've already built, continuing to feed them to a certain degree. That would be true more for these individuals that are plotting for their downgrade. But again, with one exception, no one is even down in power apathy, and certainly no one is down in apathy. You are, by and large, plotting in power. You are, most of you are fully engaged in executing. We have a few people that are in this awareness and even the gentle intention sort of mode. And I'll go into deeper detail on any of that if you guys would like. So I'm using language that presupposes you guys have at least a basic understanding of the different layers of the change grid. So questions, comments, anything I can go into in greater detail?
Yeah, T, something comes to mind for me is I'm looking at my results and saying to myself, is it possible that my results are skewed because of the timing of when I took the actual change grid? Is it because it's in the beginning of the year? I just done my planning. I'm confident about my plans and all of that. So it looks rosier than it might actually be.
Well, yes, but remember, this is what distinguishes the change grid from all other instruments that people might be using, is that the change grid is dynamic. What we learned when you filled it out, we believe is useful, but the joke we always make is that you have to think of a change grid as being the equivalent of a piece of fruit in the market. It's only going to stay fresh for so long. And that's why we encourage people who are using the change grid to repeat the change grid at intervals, whether you are working with a coaching client and want to do it every week, every other week, every month, or you're working with a population inside of an organization. You say, let's do it monthly or quarterly at the very least. We want to make sure we're always looking at fresh data. I always laugh when people say, I want to keep my change grids because, and I go like, well, that's fine, but that's like keeping gym socks after they're full of holes. You know, what value does it have after X amount of time has passed? So it is
Does
because
that
of
mean,
that. Yep.
does that mean that we should, if we're doing that, let's say it's a monthly cadence, whatever it is, should we be using the exact same questions?
You certainly can if what you want to do is do what we call change grid journaling. When you're doing a change grid journal, you are using a set activity list and administering it umpteen times. So we say it should be the initial administration and then once a month for a year, or if you want to look at a quarter, the initial administration followed by once a week for 3 months. And you can really then track movement on the change grid. So if you are putting in place some sort of a developmental plan for that individual or that group, we should see their perceived ability go up. We should see their perceived challenge go down. And then as you see that updated change grid, you would say, well, ability has gone up. That's really great, but the challenge has dropped further than I wanted it to. I need now to go in there and put in place some upgrade maneuvers. Well, if you go in and put in some upgrade maneuvers and the next time you administer it, you see that their level of ability has suddenly shrunk back. You went like, well, maybe that was too much of a challenge increase all at once. So at a certain point in time, this becomes an instrument for fine tuning the kinds of coaching we might be doing or the kinds of, well, whatever developmental work you do, just plug in whatever your label is. But that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like everything when it comes to human development is in constant motion. And that's why I've always questioned the value of static testing. So while it's interesting to find out that I tested out to be a whatever, great. But so what? How does that affect my actual behavior, my actual life now? Well, we needed a dynamic tool that allows us to look at dynamic activities and profile it. So that was probably a very long answer to your question, but
I appreciate that. That gives me a
Yeah.
lot of insight.
okay, but now I'm going to put you into the step into the fishbowl jump in the fishbowl for all of us for just a second. You don't need to disclose which of these letters you are unless you feel so inclined. But I would say to you, you know what, you filled this out a week ago. Let's look at this activity right now. In fact, all of you do this. Think about expanding my work with my existing clients and don't even look at where you currently are on the change group. Just answer these 2 questions. How do you rate your ability? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. How do you rate your ability to keep your calendar filled with billable services? So again, ability range from 0 to 12 right now. Give yourself a numerical rating. How do you rate your ability to keep your calendar filled with billable services? And then how challenging do you think it's going to be? Again, 0 to 12, 0 is low, 12 is high. How challenging do you think it is? So come up with a new coordinate pair. Let me know when you guys have all done that. I consider silence to be agreement, just so you know. So find your coordinates then. So if you said, well, right now I view my ability as being a 9 and the challenge is an 11. All right, well, 9, here we are for ability, 9, da, 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 da. Count up, count up, count up. There's 11 for challenge. Right there is where 9 and 11 would cross. Yep, 9 and 11. So that puts me on the border between being a driven expressive driver and an expressive driven driver. So that kind of puts me right there on the border. What does that tell me? It tells me right now, I have this energy that says I'm going to make this happen and I'm going to make this happen come heck or high water. I am not only fully engaged, I'm plotting out here in execution. And so, I'm a bit of an unstoppable force right then and there. My only thing I would caution someone on is that you're on the border of the now great danger zone. So don't become a bit of a bull in a china shop as you try to go about filling your calendar. So keep it diplomatic. Remember that amiable energy a little bit. So that's it. So Boris, where did you plot as of today?
As of today, I've actually gone up grid a little bit.
Give me your,
So I'm
yeah,
at,
yeah, give me your
yeah.
coordinates.
So my coordinates would be at 10 on the challenge and 10 on the ability.
Okay.
And I was at 9 and 10.
Okay, so, all right, so
I've gone up a little.
you were at 9 and 10. Okay, so your grid is not in this population right now then.
Maybe not.
Right. Okay, that's fine. So okay, so Boris is this blank space right here. Something boosted your perceived level of ability, yet the perceived level of challenge has remained high in less than 1 week time. So you were darn close to the ideal location. Now you're plotting at the ideal location. Does that feel right to you?
Probably because I feel pressured now that I had a week of COVID interrupt my life.
So you got to catch up a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, well, this is the perfect place for you to be to make that all happen. So yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to ask questions, give Boris some feedback, throw out your own idea? David, I see you're unmuted.
You know, T, I think this is going to be a little bit of a challenging year. So I appreciate Boris's confidence. I don't quite share it.
Okay. Give us more around that.
Well, it's just, I think that with the pandemic and, you know, back to office, not in office, Zoom, I think we're still at a bit of an inflection point. I'd like to see it tip one way or the other.
All right. And so right now, David, where are you plotting? So what would your new numbers be today?
So I would say I'm plotting around 710.
710. Okay. And so look where you are right now. That makes you an amiable, expressive driver. Again, if anyone wants me to ever review those energies, so you understand the primary, secondary, and tertiary energies, I'm happy to do that. But David says he's right here right now. So that would be an amiable, expressive driver. The level of challenge as a 10 is exactly where we want it to be. But David's plotting his level of perceived ability as several points lower. And so, David, during your debrief, we're going to want to talk about what your process is right now. Is this more a time to be working existing clients for expanding opportunities with them, or is this more about going after new kinds of things?
Because I did send you an email for a change grid reading.
Oh, good, wonderful. But that would be our goal. We got to get your perceived ability to go from a 7 to a 10. Because for all of you listening to the call, if you don't know David, I promise you, David is not a 7 when it comes to his ability to keep his calendar full. So, something is going on circumstantially. Again, you've indicated the, COVID and economy and all that. So this might be about revisiting skills that he hasn't had to deploy in recent times or whatever. So
I think that's actually quite adept.
Yeah. That's what the grid would basically help us to do. But that would be the focus from a developmental perspective. We don't need to worry about challenge. We need to focus on boosting ability. That being said, and I'm doing a gifted students program right now, is there is a natural relationship between perceived ability and perceived challenge. And that is, in general terms, as ability goes up, perceived challenge goes down. And so if you've got someone who is already plotting at an ideal location when it comes to challenge, how do you go about boosting their perceived ability without losing their perceived rating of challenge? So that's what we're going to be working on. Yep. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Tia, I was just going to say, I would agree with David. My mindset is exactly where his is. And I plotted at 8 and 10.
8 and 10. Okay, right.
Yeah, particularly when I think about the training contracts of my work. Historically, things slow down significantly towards the end of the fourth quarter and stay there around the beginning of the first quarter. Mm-hmm. So this is that lull period. Right. And so it's mostly driven by the client as opposed to what I may be able to do.
Right. And so, again, from a developmental perspective, you got plenty of perceived challenge. The question is, how do we go about boosting that perceived ability by a couple of points? Now, I've done plenty of work with clients who, at the end of the year, are scrambling to spend what money's left in their budget and then start the year off wondering if they dare spend anything at all for fear of what might be coming down the road. So, is this about learning how to lovingly pester people to get these contracts renewed or, whatever the case may be? So that's a different skill set than the skill set you would need, in the middle of the year or at the end of the year when they really are sometimes looking to just spend money so they don't lose it in their budget in the following year.
T, what's interesting about Tim's and David's comments in relationship to my own change grid is because of the type of work that I focus on, which is the crisis consulting piece, we actually view the world in the same way. They're just viewing it from a different context than I am because I see the mess that's coming as being beneficial to my business.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
As opposed to probably them having more concern around it.
Indeed. In fact, years ago, we started talking about the need for all of us, regardless of what our practice, we'd like it to be or it's been historically, we need to be able to serve as both an emergency room and a wellness clinic. So when the economy gets tough, wellness is a really tough sell. But an emergency room will always be busy. And so Boris, because he focuses on companies that are dealing with some sort of crisis, is primarily positioned as an emergency room. Well, if you want those relationships to continue long after the initial emergency has passed, the crisis has passed, well, that's about being able to morph a little bit into a wellness clinic. So now we healed your broken bone. Let's talk about getting stronger, where a lot of people in our line of work are primarily working with people who are in good shape, hoping to help them move to the next level. And then boom, a crisis occurs. And suddenly they can't put their time, energy, bandwidth, resources into that developmental sort of stuff. They got to take care of this problem and it needs to be taken care of now. Well, if they only view you as being someone who delivers wellness services, you can lose opportunity. But if you can say, well, that's why we also serve as an emergency room when the needs arise. Now you can actually protect yourself from changes in the economy or changes that are just happening in the marketplace. Thoughts about that? Brian, I see you've unmuted.
I was going to ask, is there a middle?
Well, this is the thing. If I wanted to market myself, the marketing that I would do as an emergency room is dramatically different than the marketing that I would do as a wellness clinic. So you can be both of those things and you can have both brochures available. It really is more about what are you going to keep top of mind with your clients in this particular set of circumstances.
Got it.
I want to have both ready to go and fine. At my website, I can say, look, I can service both of these, but I promise you, no one is coming. Oh, well, okay, you're a physician who comes to you and says, all right, Brian, today I've got two problems. Number one, I'm hemorrhaging. And number two, I'd like to have a little bit more energy. That's not.
Yeah, I think I was thinking because I think I'm in on this, I believe. But my thinking is, these are the Great Resignation is a crisis, but the crisis is a boil over point, right? So it's kind of the same thing when someone has a diagnosis. The diagnosis didn't just appear. Oftentimes it's a symptom that's been neglected or something you just didn't pay attention to or something that was put on the back burner and you gave something else more priority because it just wasn't significant enough. So I'm thinking about, okay, well, how do we get to a point where we start working on preventive things where that does not have to occur, where you can actually cultivate attention in real time so that you don't have to go from crisis to crisis to crisis. Not such that you won't ever have a crisis, but how about we manage that? And that's what I look at when I'm looking at all this sports medicine research, right? It's about managing your energy on a consistent basis, not just once and, one time kind of thing, because then you're playing a game of one-upmanship.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's kind of like the work that I think you're doing in your ongoing education as a physician. You were talking about how do you really get the public to change its attitude around healthcare? Ultimately, how do we get the country to change its attitude around healthcare in the US? Because obviously, if we put more energy into being wellness oriented, we could watch a whole lot of chronic diseases be dramatically reduced, hopefully maybe even eliminated to a certain point. So, but you got a big task ahead of you.
Yeah.
Let me bring up a different point here that
Yep.
came to mind as we're talking about this. We had a conversation with our team recently about who our ideal client is, and do we want to message around companies that are in a growth phase or growth minded versus companies that are in some level of distress in the crisis context. And what came out of that conversation was the branding of our ideal client is somebody that is uncomfortable with the status quo.
Okay.
Whatever that status quo is.
Right.
That could be somebody that's in crisis, or it could be somebody that's growth minded. Either way, it's about positioning the messaging around that. And I think that's where, when you talk about wellness clinic versus emergency room, you want to be both.
Yep.
Then that's how we're addressing it, by saying, if you're uncomfortable with the status quo, wherever that means you're sitting in an emergency room or a wellness room, we can help you there.
Absolutely. Well, and I think we can take a look at the 5 levels of tension to see which one do I need to be when, because ultimately you've got to meet your prospects, your clients where they are. If they're up in stress, we know that stress is all about solving problems. They have a problem, they want it solved. If they're down in power stress could still be a little bit about problems that need to be dealt with, but they aren't overwhelmed. They're not up in stress about that. But this is also where people see opportunities and they feel a sense of urgency around going after that opportunity. Strike while the iron is hot, jump on board, see the potential in the marketplace. And so I think you're describing both of these. You got the people in crisis who would be up in stress, and you got the people who really want to move forward and go to the next level and do it now. Now that energy will continue to happen as people move down into power, but power tends to be a little bit more, power tends to be a lot more proactive. So they tend to take much more time gathering data, understanding something, planning, structuring, etc. Where power stress is in a big hurry.
Right.
So this is about, dashing to the outcome. Oops, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. Where am I at? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm not talking about the activity anyway. I'm talking about levels of tension. So so power. Now you get down to power, apathy, and apathy. Now where are you at? A new type of crisis has come into play. So Boris, how often are you dealing with companies whose crisis is not because something is exploding or is about to explode, but in fact, their situation is that the business ownership is slowing down. People are thinking about retiring. All their equipment is old and outdated. Their market, they haven't done any innovation. They've been resting on their laurels for so long that a whole new crisis has appeared. But it's a crisis of a lack of productive tension that will ultimately create a crisis of too much tension. Otherwise, they're just going to kind of fizzle out, kind of disappear down here.
Yeah, that's just not our ideal client.
No, you want people that are power and north. Power and north. I keep clicking things. Sorry, but I'm messing up what I'm showing you. All right. What is going on with my computer? It keeps saying that my computer doesn't have adequate power. So I don't know what that's all about. That's all right. I'll do something magical. Y'all can stop worrying now. T will be fine. All right, so let's take a look at the next.
Looks like your indicator on the screen shows that there's no power plugged in your battery.
Yeah, I don't know why that is, because it is. It just doesn't seem to be working. Well, yeah, it made the right sound.
Something happened.
Yeah, something good happened. All right. So, all right, that's activity number 2. Let's move on to activity number 3. Okay, click here. Expanding my work with my existing clients. Well, obviously, one of the ways that you could go about filling your calendar with billable services and meeting your financial objectives is to make sure that the work you've got going with your existing clients is nice and solid. And so, and for this particular activity, I said, well, the ideal location for this would be as an expressive analytical driver. So let's dissect that energy just so you guys can agree or disagree. This is a driver activity. I want to make this happen. How do I want to make this happen? It requires me to be more analytical, more thoughtful about the kind of work that I'm doing and the kind of work that is left to be done. Or generally when people hire someone like us, they bring us in and they don't use the whole menu of services that we offer, every program, every service. They don't do that. They tend to use one program or one or two little services, and they forget that we can do all these other things, and we forget to remind them that we can do all these other things. And so sometimes you just need to get into an analytical mode and say, are they even aware of the fact that I do this and I do this and I can help them with this and this and this? So maybe this is about educating them to expand that work. Maybe expanding the work means you've been doing great work with this individual or this department. What other individuals and departments could they point you to? So some internal referrals. Well, what are you going to do? So there's a lot of ways to do that. Now, in this particular, oh, by the way, and it's an expressive tertiary energy because I think you need to be imaginative. You need to be a bit more enthusiastic. You need to have a little bit more passion around being of service to that particular client. That being said, I'm sure all of you by this stage in your career have learned that not all clients that you could have are necessarily worth having. And once in a good while, it may not be a mistake for you to fire a client. So I'm not saying you want to expand work with clients you don't enjoy, but the clients that you do enjoy, the work that you do enjoy doing, well, why not? See, first and foremost, what can you do to do more of it with the clients you already have in place? Now, we did say that in order to land at this place, you need to perceive your level of ability as being quite high, a nice solid 10. And the challenge should not be all that difficult. I mean, you already know these people, you know the company, so it shouldn't be a 10 or a 12 when it comes to perceived challenge, just a nice solid 8. Now we do have one individual floating way up here, gave their ability a 0, the challenge an 11. I don't know who this individual is, but I would not be at all surprised to find out that that client is gone or going away, or that that's not the way their business operates. So there's no opportunity to expand work with existing clients. You always have to be getting new ones, new ones, new ones. So we'll see. Wait, go back. In fact, I just saw my answer right there. All right, so what concerns me about this? Right now, you guys are plotting on average as a somewhat driven, amiable driver. So there's plenty of driver energy. I'm happy with that. But where is this amiable energy coming from, and how does that compromise your ability to secure that additional work? Anyone want to unmute and throw out your own theory about how does being too amiable impact your ability to expand work with existing clients?
Well, may not be assertive.
May not be assertive. There's the answer. I wonder how many people that are in this particular situation, by the way, you got a big cluster of people plotting there, are of the belief that the client already knows everything you do, and if they wanted you to do more, they'd ask you. So you're kind of like waiting for it to happen instead of do something a little bit more definitive to make it happen. All right. So that could be one possibility there. But the bottom line for me is that with a couple of exceptions, I'm all right with the level of challenge that I'm seeing, this range of challenge. But look at how many people are rating their ability lower. This is, I think, 16 people in this particular profile. Only 3 out of 16 are at the ideal level of ability to do this. So that's a pretty significant segment of the population who's saying, like, I really don't know how. So this would tell me that on ongoing professional development or Circle of Brilliance, maybe a great topic would be, how do you go about expanding your work with your existing clients? When I do your individual readings, we can be very specific with you, but I think there's some general education that could work here. That education alone, increasing your ability by, that would be 3 points. Yeah, 2.5, 3 points may very well be all it takes to lower the level of perceived challenge for these individuals down to 10. So yeah, if you got a challenge of an 11 for this activity, I can't wait to hear that story. Can't wait to hear that story. What's making that so challenging when it comes to these relationships that are already in place? Okay, thoughts, comments about this one? No? All right,
Well,
so, yeah, go ahead.
you know,
Yeah.
question on my end, T. I'm plotting. I think I'm the H in this, and for me, the kind of sense is kind of like measuring success. If you don't need me anymore, so you good. You don't need me. And what you said earlier about the contracts, I do have a number of organizations that I represent, kind of contractually, and so it's resonating with me. And then seeing the almost apathy down there is a little bit
Right. Yeah,
my end.
if that's you, well, here's what I would say to you. It's like, while it may very well be true, and I know you well enough to know it is, that you've done great work with people who have benefited greatly and admire you greatly. What if the truth is they were never the population you were intended to work with? What if
Yeah.
there's another group out there that desperately needs you but doesn't know you exist? And even because we're talking with existing clients inside of the same client footprint, they could be out there. So there's a whole other realm there that I would
Mhm.
still be encouraging you to at least think about, if not actively pursue.
No, I think that's huge. It's almost kind of like an epiphany hearing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about that. Um, I want everyone to understand that your success has been hard earned. Over the course of the years you've been doing what you've been doing, your ability has continued to go up because, again, ability, knowledge, skill, experience, and core resources gets involved too, but knowledge, skill, and experience. As those three things go up, your expertise is automatically going up. Your wisdom is increasing. That should mean that your value is also increasing, and your ability to serve the next level of client is now more ready than ever before. Well, let's get out there and deploy this wonderful expertise at a whole new level. You'll be helping another range of clients with hopefully a more interesting range of situations to be working with, and you'll probably make more money doing it too.
Mhm.
All right. Okay. Other comments, questions, thoughts about this particular activity? All right, then let's take a look at number 4. Again, these activities are ordered in a reason that we hope leads to a logical debrief. So again, getting back to what we talked about last time around, you can put together an activity list and have the activities be completely random. But if you can put them into a logical sequence, it helps the person as they're filling it out because their mind is naturally moving to the next step along whatever that map would be. But it also helps you when you're debriefing their profile to be able to tell a story that ultimately leads them on their path of self-discovery. So they realize whether or not they need your guidance. So we've already talked about meeting your financial goal. We've talked about keeping your calendar filled. If you don't keep your calendar filled, you're not going to meet your financial goal. How can we fill that calendar? Activity number 3, expanding work with existing clients. And activity number 4, leveraging the success you've had in bringing you more business. Now, this could be more business inside of that existing client, although as I've already said, I kind of view that more as expanding a relationship with an existing client. But I've worked with companies that are big enough that I know that while they might all be part of the same large organization, they might as well be totally separate businesses. So I completely get that. Nevertheless, can you leverage the success that you've had in bringing you more business? Now, I decided decided to put this debrief into building a career that matters because a great many of the remedies that you would want to pursue to fix these sorts of things are in the recordings for building a career that matters. And I'm slowly but surely moving all those recordings onto YouTube, but they are currently up on the Productive Tension website. So if you want, I'll be more than happy next time around to give you guys a review of how you can get to those recordings. But nevertheless, let's take a look at this. Leveraging the success I've had in bringing me more business. Now, as I look at the results here, one thing that immediately grabs my eye is that things are now more densely concentrated in a particular region of the change grid. So with the exception of a few people, everybody is not only out here in the world of that driver energy, primary energy. I'm seeing a lot of people that are driven, amiable drivers, driven drivers. You know, this is a lot of energy. So again, this little band right here that I'm squiggling through right now, that's where engagement lives. So you guys are very much engaged in doing this activity. A couple of you are still formulating that intention to get engaged. Some of you are just now becoming more aware of this. So, so what would the work be here? Now, again, I think that this is a little bit more of an analytical driver activity. It's a driver activity because you're trying to make something happen. So that's a given. But why is it an analytical driver? Because I use the verb leveraging the success, leveraging. This requires someone to be thoughtful. Look at the success. Have you taken an inventory recently? Have you updated your client list? Have you updated your CV? You know, have you really said, well, what does my success translate into in terms of tangible, leverageable resources? And so maybe you got involved in doing a new program that someone else might want. Maybe you've completed some additional education during this whole COVID situation. Now it's time to deploy that. I mean, who really knows? All I know is that you got to be able to leverage that success in order to help you more easily bring you more business. And that's a very much of a puzzle to be figured out. Hence the idea of it being an analytical driver activity. It does require a good deal of imagination and enthusiasm. That's why there's an expressive tertiary energy when it comes to this ideal location. So that diamond is sitting at an expressive, analytical driver energy. And that's what you want to be. So look where you guys are. Darn close. If I just increased your perceived ability by, say, I don't know, 1.5, you'd be exactly where you want to be on average. Some of you at the individual level need a bit more training. We have an ability rating as low as a 4, couple at 6, couple at 7. Then we're getting into the general vicinity of where we really like to be. So I think we just need to talk a little bit more about how do you go about leveraging that success? What does that translate into behaviorally? And what do you do after you've completed those tasks to inform others that you exist or that you could be of service in a particular kind of area? Comments, thoughts about that?
This one is an interesting one for me because, again, I think I am the in, and I feel more comfortable with this activity than the last activity, it seems like.
Well, now that's something to be worth doing a deeper dive. Anyone have any thoughts about why might Brian feel more comfortable going after brand new business than expanding relationships with existing clients?
It could be the past success you've learned, and now you can apply it to new clients. And whereas with other clients, it may be, well, maybe they're in a good enough place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that, Peter. I think as a creative, I've always been a creative thinker, and thing I understand about creative thinkers, they're great at starting new things.
Yeah.
Terrible at finishing them.
Yeah, because you've
And
moved
during
on
this
before.
time, the pandemic, I met so many people, so I was all about this idea of OPN, other people's network, and leveraging from that perspective, like as a joining their team as a creative person to help them get something started. And I get great value out of that. And I don't mind. I don't have to be in the front of anything. As long as I'm creating, I'm quite comfortable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that could very well be speaking to the idea that once you've figured something out, once you've not necessarily even stuck around long enough to master it, but become fluent enough in it, that you kind of go, all right, I got to find something more stimulating.
Mm-hmm.
I need more interesting clients. I need more interesting work. Again, all of you know, Brian's a physician. For a while, I considered going down the medical career path. And one thing that I noticed was that at a certain point in time, physicians are asked to choose a particular discipline and to pretty much devote their career to that. So whatever their specialty is, that's what they want to do. And I thought, how come I can't evolve inside of medicine and start up with one specialty and then move on to the next greatest one after I've learned what I could learn from that specialty? What can I move up to? What can I move up to? What can I move up to? And, people just said, that's just not the way the education in medicine is typically structured. People do that, but they're the exception to the rule. And I thought, good grief, if I start off as a family practice physician and think, oh, I get to spend the next 40 years taking care of people's sniffles, I'm going to go, oh, no.
That's
Can do that.
exactly why I did a residency, and I've always had what I call a portfolio career of just engaging in different projects that interest me. Some not necessarily medicine, some, others are.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you got to dabble. And I mean, think about this too. Let's say that you're a physician and you've had a nice career and you decide, I'm going to retire somewhat, but I'm going to go to a more rural place where suddenly you have to be more than what that one discipline was all about if you really want to be of service to a community that doesn't have all these specialists readily available. Whatever, you at least have to be conversant, if not a little bit more fluent in a lot of different practices. And so that may very well speak more to what your work style, lifestyle, mindset happens to be than anything else. So anybody else on the call want to admit that you do find the kind of clients you've typically worked with getting rather routine and boring? Anybody? No.
Yeah, I would say so. Absolutely. That it does get boring. It gets easier.
Yeah.
And it brings back to the point of what you said earlier is, okay, how do I increase attention, raise the bar, go more towards other clients that would be more challenging and also generate more revenue?
That's right. And so in Peter's particular situation, among his professional credentials, he's also a professor. And so Peter, do you ever think about, okay, are you doing more freshman level undergrad? Are you doing more junior and
What I
senior
did,
grad? Yeah.
blessedly, I retired because I was getting into apathy but the capacity part. So I retired, and so I'm still an academic, but I'm doing a lot of webinars, sometimes 15 webinars a week.
Oh, wow.
But that's the activity for it's leveraging, and I'm getting a lot of clients just from these continuous webinars.
Excellent. All right, good. So again, you guys are plotting in a good point. We just need to do something at the individual level for those who are plotting quite low on the, no one's plotting low, but you're plotting relatively moderately low on your perceived ability there. We got to get you up here with the rest of the flock and hopefully help you guys square this out. I'm loving doing this debrief. If you guys are enjoying this, well, then I will just say Thursday, let's continue the debrief. The next activity we'll be looking at is capturing the attention. Ooh, an explosion occurred on the change grid. Capturing the attention of a marketplace distracted by the pandemic, the economy, our political landscape, and life in general. And I did put that one there because a lot of you could be going after expanding your relationship with your existing clients and leveraging your success to find new clients. But as you're doing that, you're bumping into this. So you could go after them, but they're distracted. Their attention is elsewhere. So how do we get them back to the attention you want them to be in? So this one a little bit more of an explosion all over the change grid. So we'll talk about that next time around. So with that, thank you everybody for joining in. Hope to see you all on Thursday's call. So bye for now, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.